Welcome to this video. In this video, we will see how do we create an agent that supports multi-turn conversation. It means that, for instance, first user will be asking, "Hey, like, what is the weather in Toronto?" And the second question he will be asking, "What are the places that I can visit?" Right. So for the second question, the user it's not saying like which city he is looking at. Rather, like he is saying like, "Hey, what are the places that I can refer?" Right. So in that sense, like the agent should know the user is actually talking about the city Toronto, which he mentioned in the first question, right? In that sense, the agent should keep the conversation, right? So it should be able to refer back to the previous history, conversation history, and extract the relevant information, right? So in order to do that, we have something called a thread. So that's what we will be discussing, right, in this particular video. It's pretty simple. If I just come over here, like actually, like I just create a agent, similar to like how we used to create the agent. And then like when you have an agent, all you need to do is that you need to create something called a thread. So when you create a thread and use the thread, when you submit your input to the agent will make use of this particular thread and capture all the relevant information going forward, as long as you provide this thread information in the subsequent conversation, right? So basically, like behind the scenes, Microsoft takes care of capturing all this information, putting it under the thread, right? You really don't have to do anything. That is the beauty of this framework, right? All you need to do is that, again, just create a thread, pass it with your conversation, right? So now let's go and see like how exactly it works. So again, like if at all you wanted to delete the thread, you can very well delete the thread. So where do I see the thread, right? So if I just come over to the portal here, if you just come over, click on this agent, and if you just go here, it will create a thread for us. Whenever you say, hey, like create a new thread, something of this sort, get a new thread, it will create a thread for you. So what happens like if you don't specify this thread information, like so far the agent will still create a thread, but that is something called a disposable thread. So once the execution is done, the thread will be disposed. It is of no use, right? But like when you create a thread, the history will be stored. So now let's go to the Visual Studio and see like how exactly it works. Here it's all going to be the same, but then like as said, I'm just creating a new thread here, and the user questions are like what is the weather in Tokyo, and I pass the thread information. They would again asking what was the last city he asked about, right? So now again like he is asking like how compared to London's weather, right? Because like we are using a weather tool here, for all these we will be just responding back the static content here, like the weather in that particular city, it's a sunny or whatever is the time, be it London, be it Tokyo, or whatever is that. So that is what we will be responding back, because like that is the tool that we are referring here, right? So now let's see like how exactly this works, right? Now let me go and run the program. So this is going to be my 16th program, AGF thread. So let it run. In between, like if you see here, like this is how this will get executed, right? So first we create a thread. So now we will pass that user query along with the thread information. Now what Azure service will do is that in case of any history exists in the history database, it will pull up that information, pass it to the LLM. The agent will respond back, and the like finally it will save that information into the thread history. So in the upcoming user query, if you say, hey, like what is the city that I asked, so now again like the user, like we are passing this thread information, it will again go back and pull up the history from the database and pass it to the LLM. So that way like the overall conversation, it's stored somewhere, so the agent can always refer back, because if I expand this one, so first, like what is the weather like in Tokyo? The weather in Tokyo, it's a sunny, whatever is that. What is the last city that I asked about? The city, it's Tokyo. Because it now again like it respond back the weather in London, it's also sunny with the same degree, because like we are using the tool that always returns the same weather information. So it says that the weather in both Tokyo, it's the same. It all happens because of this thread, and the history it's being perceived in the thread database, right? We really don't have to do anything in order to manage all this conversation. I remember like in the past we had to send the user queries back and forth, the overall payload will be so huge. Now thanks to a thread, we really don't have to do anything, just pass this thread information, right? So now let me clear this console. Let's see like how do we make use of an existing thread, right? So in the previous program, like I showed you like what is this thread, how do we use that, right? Now in this program, what I want to do is that I really quickly want to create a API, and the like our user will be using that particular API to interact with the agent, and the like how he will be passing the thread information back and forth. Right now overall execution, it is going to be the same. So I have the same kind of a weather tool here, right? And the like what I do is that I created a fast API client here, and this is what will host my agent, right? Now what I want to do is that this program, so what I want to do here is that when a user ask a question, he will be passing the thread information. If there is no thread information it's given, then it will create a new thread, and the like when it return back, it will always return back two things, like answer to the user query as well as the thread information. So what user have to do is that in the next time he will be reaching this API, he will be passing the next query plus the thread information, right? Basically like the thread ID, he needs to pass that. So that's how we can use it. Now with that, like let me go and run this program. So Python 17 dash, okay, let me run that. So quickly it will create a fast API. Now let me go and run this curl commands here. So let me copy this. So what I'm saying is that this is running in the port 8000. So with the endpoint chat, I'm asking you what is the weather like in London, same query, right? But this time around a thread ID, because like this is my first conversation, I really don't have the thread ID, and run call, and that is going to hit the API. So it is going to create agent, and then like it is going to respond back. Now I have the thread ID here. Now if you see the weather in London, it's sunny with whatever the weather is, that, right? Now I copy this thread ID, and I will pass this information, right, to the subsequent query. So I will go and run this curl command. So now as we are passing the thread information, it should have access to the previous query, right? So now it says the weather in Paris also sunny with whatever is that. So it says here also sunny because like it knows that we have requested the information for a specific city, right? Now if you wanted to go ahead and do the multi turn conversation, you can very well do that by passing this thread information between your calls. Now let's go ahead and discuss about the next topic, that is going to be a state management. So you have noticed the ChatGPT, you will have all your previous conversation listed, right? When you click on that, it will load all this information. So how exactly it does, so behind the scenes it stores the thread ID and its relevant information. So think of this way. So for each conversation, there is going to be a thread created, and like when you have a multiple conversation, each conversation will have a thread information. So somehow you should be able to capture and store this thread information. When a user opens your ChatGPT UI, you should be able to pull all the thread information related to a specific user, and based on which you have to build all this, right? So in order to do that, you can very well use the state management. So basically when you have your thread information, you can serialize and deserialize this thread information. That's what we are going to discuss in this particular topic, right? So first we will have a thread history.json, so in which we will be capturing all the thread relevant information. If a file exists, we will deserialize. If doesn't exist, we will create one, right? And in this particular file, we will be storing all the thread information, right? So and like when a user runs, then it will deserialize and see like if there are any existing thread, then it will load that thread into the user request, and it will respond back to us, right? So now let me go ahead and run this particular program. Let me clear the console here again. So if you see here, it will create a filed something called something like this. So thread history.json, so in which it will store all this relevant information. So let me first go and delete this file, so before I run that. So now let me go and run this particular file 18. Now let me go ahead and run this file. So now it is asking us what is your input. So first let me ask what is the capital of India. So it is again going to create an agent, and the like agent will respond back. Now the thread history.json file get created. If you see here, like number of messages 1, and this is the thread ID, right? So basically, like the whenever you create a thread, the agent framework provides a mechanism for you to serialize and deserialize and store this information. So basically storing, it's up to you, but then like a serializing and deserializing, it's part of a agent framework, right? And then like now let me go and ask this, what is the capital of Canada. So now it is again going to, now it has the user input, and then like it will load the profile information, profile history, and it will respond back to us. So it says the capital city of Canada, it's Ottawa, and then like how far they are, because now I am not saying like which city we are talking about, right? Because I already mentioned 2 cities, and that information, it's part of a thread, and the program has access to the thread. It should be able to pull up this information. Now if you go here, uh, let it complete. So it says that the distance between New Delhi and Ottawa, it's whatever the distance is, that right, it has some information for us. Now if you just go here, it says that hey, like this is the thread you are using it, and the like just you have. So you can very well have this thread information somewhere, like in a JSON file or in your database. So typically you will be storing this information in a database, right? So that like you can, whenever a user accesses your UI, then you can pull up all the information and show it to the user. When a user click on that particular topic, particular user input or whatever is that, then at the time like what thread he is talking about, or relevant to that particular title that you are showing in your UI, and pull that information and show it in the UI. And that's how it works, right? That's how like all the agent UIs that you have, ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever is that, right? And basically underneath this is how they do it. Okay, now let's move forward and let's talk about something called as structured output. With that, like let me go ahead and clear this. Let me clear this. Let me like now what I want to do is that, so user will be saying like my name is John D, and I'm 30 years old, whatever is that, right? Now what I want to do is that I want to extract this information, the user information, right? So basically like I have defined my model here. So when a user, like when my agent respond back, it has to respond back in this particular format, right? So now I'm saying like extract the person information from the user's text. So user will be providing this kind of a text. So right, my name is whatever is that, I'm how old ever, and then like I do this in this particular city, right? So now if you see here, usually like we will be passing the user input, and like in the previous like file we showed you like how do we use the thread information. Now we will introduce one more. So this is called response format. When you pass the response format, uh, then the agent will know that hey, like I need to respond back to the user, but like when you respond back to the user, I have to follow this particular format, right? So now with that, like let me go and run this particular file. So this is 19 AG. Okay, now let me run this file. So this is the user input. Now let's say like how exactly the agent is responding. So the agent is responding, name is this, age is this, occupation is this, city is this. So now what I'm saying is that you really don't have to have the very paragraph kind of a response from the agent. Rather, like you can very well control the response format by defining your data format here, right? So like likewise, like if you see here, this is the data format that should exactly match the age, occupation, city, everything should match exactly. What happens in case it doesn't have the information, it is going to be empty, right? But then like it shows the way for us to extract the information in a format that I am interested in. that can be very well depending. Let's see like how do we extract the user personal information, right? For instance, let's say like I'm saying like my name is Karthikeyan Vijay Kumar and I live in Toronto and I like to play cricket, and I have a specific kind of a car, right? So these are all the information the agent can capture and keep it, so that in the future when you want to ask something here like I am looking for a paint for my car, now you really don't have to specify which car you're talking about, because like the agent should have all your information, right? So we will extract all this information and store it into the profile. So in this time around I don't want to define the data model here, rather like I want to say like any personal information, any field capture and store it into your profile file. For that, let's say like how exactly this is going to work here. So now let me go and minimize this. So like we will be using something called AI memory extractor. It's a pretty simple Python file implementation, right? So when a program starts, it try to see if there is any existing file. If there is a file, then it will load that information. Basically like this file will have all your profile information, pretty similar to this thread.json file. So we will create, right? Now what we'll do is that whenever user send a message, we will be calling something called invoking. So that would be part of this class AI memory extractor. So that class will get called, that will load the profile information, and that information will be passed to the agent, and now the agent will have your query as well as your profile information, based on which it will respond back. After the after the we receive the response from the LLM, now what we'll do is that we will call something called invoked method, that is again part of the same class. So what it will do is that it will extract the personal information, and like it will store that information into the JSON file. So that is the process. So first we will load the profile and pass the user query, get the response back to the user. Like once the information is there, then we will store the any additional information, we will store it into the profile file, right? So now let me go and see this file, right? So this is how you implement AI memory extractor. You will pass something called a context provider. You will have these two classes, so invoking and invoked. So the difference is that invoking before you pass it to the LLM, invoked after you pass, like receive the information from LLM. Again like this invoked method, if you see here, internally it will make a call to the LLM only. So it will like whatever the information that you have from the user query, it will pass it to the LLM, saying that hey, like if you find any additional profile information apart from like what I already have, extract that information, give it to me, and then like we will just update the JSON file, right? Go and run this program. So now let me go and pass the query here. So now I say my name is this, whatever is that. I just go and send it to the agent. Now it says, now if you just come over here, there is a file created with all this information, right? So I didn't say like what exactly you have to extract, right? But then like I leave it up to the LLM to identify what are all the information that you consider, the LLM consider for the profile, right? I store all this information. So now let me go and say I like to play, whatever is that, right? Also next time I say this. So now let me go and ask. Now the agent should have enough information. Now if I just come over here, it captures all this information. So now let me go and what is the weather in my place, right? Because I did not say anything, it should pull up the information from the profile. It says that Toronto, something about Toronto, right? Now how you create a profile, user profile, and store it, and like that will be used in the subsequent from the user, right? We understood what is this thread and how do we better use this thread, right? Coming videos, we will discuss about some of the most advanced concepts like middleware, observability, how do we use the MCP. Thank you for watching this video.